Have you ever heard about the lost Roman legion in China? Today, we are going to talk about that very topic. Rome was one of the greatest empires in history, and it left its mark on the whole Mediterranean. But did you know that a group of Romans got lost in China? Well, today we will discuss everything regarding this lost legion, so stay with us until the end of this video. Also, please like and subscribe so you can help us reach our goal. Ancient Rome conquered almost all of Europe, North Africa, and Western Asia. The Roman Empire was vast, and throughout its many years of existence, the Romans had many military campaigns. In fact, many people were impressed by the strength of Rome and how big their empire was. However, not everyone was fascinated by the Roman Empire. There were those who tried to go against Rome. But no matter who tried to challenge them, the outcome was always the same. A Roman victory? Or was it? A lost legion is a term used when talking about a military unit that has gone missing. This usually happens during battles where soldiers get separated from the rest of the group. This is also the case for the lost Roman legion in China, although this situation is a bit more complicated. Many Roman soldiers got lost in China during the 2nd century AD. At that time, the Chinese Han dynasty was at war with the Jangu tribe. The Jangu were a nomadic tribe who lived north of the Great Wall of China. They often raided into Chinese territory, stealing goods and livestock. As a result, the Chinese emperor sent his army to put an end to this. During this war, the Roman Empire and the Han dynasty were allies. Rome needed China's support because they were at war with the Parthian Empire. So the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius sent a delegation to meet with the Chinese emperor, his ally. The delegation was led by two men named Titus Flavius Clemens and P. Julius Quadratus. Their mission was simple: deliver a letter from the emperor and establish diplomatic relations between the two empires. But the journey was long and dangerous, so they were accompanied by a small army. In total, there were 84 officers and 13,000 soldiers. It was quite the sight to see. As they traveled through the deserts of Central Asia, they encountered the Jangu. It's a very tribe that the Chinese were trying to defeat. As soon as the battle started, the Jangu realized that the Roman soldiers weren't the best fighters. They were used to fighting in tight formations, while the Romans fought in lines. The Jangu easily defeated the Romans and captured them. However, the Jangu didn't kill them right away. Instead, they kept them as prisoners. This made the Romans think that they would be released eventually, but this wasn't the case. The captured soldiers spent 6 months with their captors, but they never got freed. Instead, the Jangu sold them as slaves. Yes, you heard us right. The Jangu sold the Roman soldiers to other tribes such as the Wusun and the Yuchi. All of these tribes were located in the Tarim Basin. Later, some of these soldiers were even taken to Korea. Most of the soldiers died during this journey, or simply from exhaustion after years of fighting. But some survived and actually made it to China. In the end, out of the 13,000 soldiers, only 66 survived. This means that the Great Roman Empire lost around 13,000 soldiers in just one battle. To make things worse, the ones who survived barely did. They came back to Rome without any glory. And what's worse, they were covered in tattoos, piercings, and scars from the battles. You can imagine how embarrassing this must have been for them, especially since the Roman soldiers were known for being strong and brave throughout the empire. But this legion wasn't. So how did they get from China back to Rome? Well, the surviving soldiers were stuck in China for 5 years. After that, the Han dynasty finally managed to defeat the Jangu and free the soldiers. When the Romans returned home, they told stories about their adventures to anyone who would listen. Some believed their stories, while others thought they were just making it up. But this isn't the most interesting part. The interesting part is that the Romans never forgot about this battle, even though it happened over 1,800 years ago. There are still people who are trying to find out what really happened to the Lost Legion. Although there aren't many sources about this event, most of the information comes from the book named Later Han Shu, which means records of the later Han dynasty. The funny thing is that even though the book talks about the Romans, it does so in only 3 short paragraphs. It doesn't go into detail about their appearance or way of life, but it does tell the story of how they were captured by the Jangu and later freed. We can also take some information from the book named The History of the Former Han Dynasty, where the author describes the Romans as white-skinned people with beards and pointed noses. This description might sound a bit racist, but it was very common at the time. Many historians say that the records about the Roman soldiers are sketchy and inaccurate. Still, no one knows the truth behind the lost Roman legion. One theory says that the Roman soldiers deserted the army and joined the Jangu. Apparently, the Jangu soldiers offered them better payment and living conditions. This is why some Romans would have preferred to join the enemy rather than fight for Rome. However, this theory isn't supported by many historians. Another theory is that the soldiers were simply tricked by the Jangu. The Jangu told the Romans that they would be released if they surrendered. Of course, this didn't happen, but the Jangu could have tricked the Romans into giving up. Fortunately, there is no evidence for either of these theories, and no one knows what really happened to the lost legion. It's also strange that there aren't any archaeological findings that could shed some light on the issue. Historians are finding it hard to find anything, even in China. It seems like the lost Roman legion is truly lost forever. But this isn't the only mysterious thing about this event. Throughout history, there have been many stories of entire armies disappearing. But most of the time, there is at least one survivor who can tell the story. However, this wasn't the case for the lost Roman legion. Even though thousands of soldiers were captured, only 66 made it back alive. What's even more surprising is that only 66 decided to come back to Rome. You can imagine how difficult this choice must have been. But in the end, they chose to return home instead of living in China. And even though they went through hell and back, they couldn't get the recognition they deserved. Throughout history, there have been many stories of bravery and glory. Soldiers returning home after years of fighting is a common sight. People cheer and celebrate their return. But this wasn't the case for the lost Roman legion. No one celebrated their return or asked about their experiences. This must have been heartbreaking for them. After all, they had been through so much. Unfortunately, most of the information about this lost legion comes from Chinese sources. And even those sources aren't exactly reliable. Most descriptions are brief and don't go into detail. There is also very little archaeological evidence to support these accounts. So it's hard to say what really happened to the lost Roman legion. But one thing is certain, it was one of the strangest events in Roman history. What do you think happened to the lost Roman legion? Let us know in the comments below. Also, please like and subscribe so you can help us reach our goal. Thank you for watching.